So thank you very much, and can I say welcome even if I'm not from Bosch, I'm from Meritocracy, so welcome to everybody. And I would like to thank you, first of all, Valeria and Simon, for hosting the event here and letting us having this interesting conversation over inclusion and diversity, which is the main topic of tonight. I'm really, really happy about being here because we founded Meritocracy 4 years ago now, with the aim of building a place where tech talent can actually express themselves and in order to build the most beautiful experience in job seeking online. The ultimate aim of building this experience was actually to let people explore workspaces, feel home on the website, and find the right place that is the right one to express their talent and to express their professional skills, their personality, and to find the future for themselves. Actually, this is in a way sort of the same concept we are tracking tonight. So when I think about inclusion and diversity, I think about how each of our companies is working to make everybody feel welcome and make every job seeker and every candidate express their talent as best. This is the definition I would give. That is actually very in line on what we did 4 years ago by creating Meritocracy. Just to give you a few words on what is our company, what do we do. We are a digital headhunting platform, and our job is to create a beautiful storytelling on our website. If you go on Meritocracy.is, you can explore more than 400 companies all around Europe, and companies on our website ask us to tell their story, ask us to send one of our photographers to create an experience that can make any candidate feel welcome, creating videos of the leaders inside the company that tells them why you should join the company, which are the challenges that you can face by joining any certain company. And we are actually, our goal is to bring this story that we create entering any of the companies we work with, to bring this story to the right tech talent all around the web. During 2018, just to give you an example, we delivered through a machine learning based technology the experience and the photos and the videos that we've been doing in companies on more than 230 channels all around Europe, with the ultimate goal of reaching the right people and actually showcasing companies where people are interacting with teams, where they are actually reading more things that are interesting and relevant to them. So our aim is to helping companies attracting the right talent through technology and bringing the talent on board. And to do it, we exploit either employer branding, and we exploit our proprietary technology to bring that employer branding to the right people, with the aim of bringing a pipeline of matching candidates. This match that is actually new between content and technology helps us to be very efficient in bringing the right talent on board, and very, very quick, because we invite tech talent in exploring the companies and reading great content in order to make them aware and great candidates. I just stopped talking about Meritocracy. Just go on the website to check out what we are doing. We have an office. We are an Italian company based in Milan, and we have an office here in Berlin. And I'm glad to introduce Shiza Tariq and Chiara Motta, who are business developers for our companies that are people based here in Berlin, and that you can meet afterwards when we're having drinks and food together. Chiara and Shiza will have also a very quick survey for you. It would be great if you can fill it out, because we put a lot of effort in thinking and designing this kind of events, and we would like to hear your feedback over the event and to understand what we can do better. So we'll reach you with the surveys. Take really 30 seconds to fill. That said, I would like to welcome our guest for the event today. So please say welcome to Judith and Nguyen Thanh, HR lead of Idagio. To Cordle, head of people and organization at Foodspring. And to Andreas Bundi, talent acquisition lead at Dalia research. The first question I have to our guest is to actually, it would be the only time tonight in which I will ask the same question to all three of you. And my question would be to describe what did you put in place in your regarding your recruiting process to remove any biases, and as we said before in the introduction, to make any candidate feel welcome and to make any candidate eager to express their talent. So I'm asking you to describe your recruiting process. Can I start from you, Andreas?
Sure. Thank you everybody for attending, first of all. My name is Andreas. I work at Dalia Research. I've been there for about 4 months, so the process I'm about to describe, not something I can take entirely credit for, but it's similar to things that I've implemented at previous employers. So I think in terms of, if you want to remove bias from a recruitment process, you need to start with yourself, recognizing your own role that you play as a recruiter, right? As this gatekeeper to opportunity. So just be aware, because you're kind of involved at every step, be aware of why you make the decisions you make, what biases you could be holding and applying to candidates. But in terms of a process, so one thing that differentiates, in my mind, a unbiased from a biased process is structure. So basically a structured process means that you apply to every candidate the same stages and you essentially ask the same questions because you're assessing the same competencies. So the way that looks at Dalia is that every candidate, once they've been screened in terms of the CV, they will go through the exact same stages. And these are agreed upon before a process starts. So basically we get a hiring committee together. We all agree what are the important competencies, so like in terms of hard skills, soft skills that we're looking for, and how can we assess these? What types of questions do we ask? What kind of tasks can we give to candidates and have them put themselves in, which will assess these. So you agree on all of that, and then you essentially make scorecards for every part of the process. At Dalia, that's a CV screen, which is the recruiter. Then you have a functional lead interview, and then it gets a little more fun. So something that Dalia does, which I think is different to other companies I've worked at, is a pretty big focus on practical assessments. So one thing we do is a written assignment. This is kind of something you've seen more commonly probably in engineering, right? Software engineering, it's pretty common to do like pair programming, code reviews. So something where you're not having the candidate talk about their past experience so much, but more show their thought process and how they approach novel situations. So we do that for all positions, from C-level down to interns. We'll do a written assignment, and then if they pass that, the final stage is what we call a workshop. So workshop, again, it's kind of a hypothetical scenario we present to them, and it gives them an opportunity to not have to talk about their past experience over and over again, which in my mind, in some ways, if you only interview using these kinds of conversations, these like more traditional interviews, you're biasing the process towards people who are just happen to be good at talking and talking through their own experience. So yeah, the workshop will be sort of an interactive hypothetical scenario where they get to talk to different stakeholders, investigate a problem, and then present a solution at the end of it. So again, the point of all of this, or what runs through all of this, is a consistent criteria which we agree upon at the very beginning, and we sort of, as a team, hold ourselves accountable to that criteria. So we say, right, we can't now introduce at a later stage something which was not agreed upon initially, and we apply the same criteria to every candidate, same process. And yeah, this focus on how does a candidate approach novel experiences, how do we get insight into their thought process, and how they, you know, investigate, how they come up with creative solutions, I think takes it's first of all, in my opinion, a better predictor of future success in a job, but also it doesn't rely so much on them talking about past experience, right? Which, you know, somebody's past experience might be limited by whatever context they were working in before. So we take that out of the equation to some extent.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is there any case in which you said, okay, we establish a process and we don't change it because this is the best way to remove bias? Is there any case in which you had precisely to change the process because you wanted to favor inclusion?
I wouldn't say we changed. Yes, we have changed the process before, due to, you know, us realizing that the particular way that we set up the workshops or the challenges just were not, you know, what we thought it was assessing ended up not. It wasn't a reliable sort of way of assessing it, but changing the process to be more inclusive. I can't think of an example off the top of my head
Which
today.
did happen? Okay.
Yeah, not one of which it did happen.
Okay. Fantastic. Judith, the same question. Can you describe your process?
Yes, hi everyone. So the process is pretty similar to what Andreas described just now, with the difference that we, when we do the job postings, we actually run them through the gender decoder to see if we're sort of addressing more male audience, female audience. Yes, of course. I said we're running the job postings through the gender decoder and then go live with them. We also have assessments for each position. In the trial challenge, and what we do is to give candidates the choice whether they want to do the challenge maybe at home or present it in the office, sort of to give them the possibility to be more comfortable in the way they were presented. And I think otherwise it's pretty much like you do. We agree on questions beforehand, so we're able to compare the candidates once they went through the interview stages, and everyone scores, or every question has a certain rubric in which you can sort of rate from 1 to 5, and then we take it from there.
Thanks. Can I ask you, did you have any feedback in your company for which, can you hear me like this? No? Okay. Did you have any case in your company in which a candidate gave you the feedback that for some reason they perceived that the process was not eager to diversity or to inclusion?
We have never received that feedback from a candidate. We have received that feedback from a team member actually, who said that one of the workshops we did for a design position was putting a candidate on the spot and would make him feel uncomfortable. So I usually go out of my way to ask for feedback from candidates when they went through the interview process, during the interview process, and make sure it's all a good experience for them.
Yeah, I can add something to that. I don't know how many people are actually recruiters in the room, but in order to, raise your hands. All right, cool.
Well, there we go.
So in order to get this kind of feedback, right, you have to look for it or ask for it or give the opportunity to give it, which I found is not kind of built into a lot of recruitment processes. So one way to get it is to send out pretty regularly like a candidate experience survey, which I feel should be pretty standard if you want to know where to improve in matters of process affecting diversity or inclusion, or otherwise, right? Just more operational things you can change to make the candidate experience better. But then also a really good forum for getting this kind of feedback is what I call lost art of the rejection call. So it's really tempting, especially if you're recruiting at high volumes, to just send out, an email, because a rejection call is by nature a little bit uncomfortable. You're giving someone bad news, they might disagree, and that's actually the interesting part, right? Like, give them a chance to voice concerns, and with regards to bias, that's a good place where you can collect that kind of feedback, find out if there's any manager in particular that was causing the person to feel discriminated against, and improve on that basis.
Thank you very much. Can I ask you, Karen, to describe your process?
Yeah, I'd like to address one thing that you said when you mentioned before I go into the process, because we have pretty much the same. I agree with Andreas and with both of them. You have to have structure, right? If you don't have structure, you have no common reference points. You don't have benchmarks for that, and you can't actually agree on the parameters of which you were trying to take a decision jointly, right, in favor for someone, and successfully onboard them in the recruiting process. So if a recruiting process has really gone super well, then the person is already actually integrated into the company before they ever walk through the door. I think we can agree on that, right? One thing that I maybe disagree with is can we remove bias? No. In the minute you have to take a decision, you're going to be biased in one direction or another, because you have to either give a thumbs up or a thumbs down to someone, and that all has to do with awareness, and it all has to do also with a bias in one or the other direction. So it's not really a question of, can I remove all of the roadblocks out to make sure that we're having a completely objective decision? No, I think it is not an objective decision, right? All studies show interviews are super terrible at assessing future career success in a role. You can basically do an interview or not do an interview, and most of the studies show the result is the same. Okay, so what does that tell us? Oh God, now we can all stop interviewing and we can just do blind CV screening, and we'll probably have the same success ratio, but that's not why we're here today, right? What we've done at Foodspring is we've said, okay, we're gonna take that on board, right? We have 19 nationalities, 144 people, 19 nationalities, which is a huge diversity issue, an integration issue. We have one common language, but at least 25 other languages that are circulating around, and right in the middle of Germany. So we basically have the United Nations in our company. I think you can also say that. So how do we cater to that? Yeah, do we want more of that? Do we want less of that? And in order to do that, the structure of the process is such that we want to get offline pretty quickly with everybody. We want to engage in a dialogue, yeah? And also give them an opportunity to show their potential, because the best way to reduce bias, and I'm totally with both of you along those lines, is to give them enough opportunity to show what they can do within a specific setting, show how is that relevant to the job and the contribution they can make, and then make sure you've got some common reference points there that validate the fact that they do bring in an experience level that's going to raise the bar in the company, if that's what we're intending to do. So what we have done is, through all of the very structured interview process and introducing, and I have to say, a tool is important, yeah? So when it's not an investment that should not be taken, it should be taken actually at the end of the day, because you can structure and coordinate the process, set your scorecards. We have to actually offset bias and have some objective reference points. We work with an ABCI diagnostic assessment that is online. We work with case studies, we work with workshops. We have a common, everybody goes through the same process, and we have now recently introduced so-called cultural interviews. Knowing that a cultural interview is based on our value system might just create a whole set of biases that we were actually looking to offset, yeah? And why did we do that? Why did we say cultural interviews are necessary? Because the behavioral framework behind the cultural interviews is what we would like to see people reference to, so that we have, in this very highly diverse environment, people who are identifying with a common goal, right? So everybody in there, and same but different, right? I think that's how we've actually decided to approach it. And we do bias training now also with the leads. So it's not only a question of agreeing on what the process should be. At each stage of the process, we're training the leads now to actually also be able to implement that and take better decisions. Yeah. So that's actually how we're doing it. Is it a perfect process? No. Is inclusion an issue? Yes. Yeah. Inclusion is definitely an issue in the startup scene because the average age is 28, right? So if we're looking at inclusion, and we're focusing specifically on opening up the field to people with disabilities, etc. Even if looking at, how did I experience getting to this place? I just wanted to tell you guys, I love this place. I think it's wonderful. But when I walked in, I didn't know how to get through the entrance. I couldn't find the door. I had to go up the stairs. And I thought if I were in a wheelchair, I wouldn't be able to access the building, or I wouldn't have known how. Yeah. And if we're thinking about integration and we're looking at that ongoing dialogue, this is exactly what we have to do if we want to open up the field. We have to make it accessible, and we have to say we're not talking about getting rid of bias, we're talking about integration and to really engage also the candidates in seeing if the place that they're interviewing for is not just a job or a next opportunity, but is a place that they want to spend a significant part of their lives contributing to, and even if it's, let's say, only for a year, it is valuable lifetime, yeah? That should be well spent, right?
Can I ask you, I was listening to you and I was asking myself, can we say that at some extent any company must have a bias and that this bias should in some way correspond to the company's core value?
Well, I think the minute a company says that person's not a cultural fit, right? Then we're talking about bias, aren't we? Yeah. So, it's really easy to kill something and get it off the plate by saying it's not a cultural fit. I think the real interesting point is when we have a discussion about what is a cultural fit? How do we want to enrich our organization, right? Is it somebody who's going to be the poster child for all of the values? Or is it going to be actually somebody who, in some cases, is a cultural add? I love this thing when we were talking about cultural fit. They said, don't talk about cultural fit, talk about what is a cultural add. So we have 5 values, we have a behavioral framework, and then we look to see that there are some people who are maybe going to add to that framework. They might not be, based on the value set as they are, the first obvious choice. Yeah? So...
Thank you very much. I was thinking about it and I agree that just saying cultural fit doesn't bring you anything. We should go and dig and dig and dig and understand what does it mean to have a cultural fit or not. So.
Especially if we had this discussion in the rejection calls, so what do I say to the candidate, right? And Scott, he's on our team here, so I just like to say, he and I had a discussion about this. What do I say? I'm just going to tell them they're not a cultural fit. No, you can't tell. How? Think about what are you? Somebody said they're not a cultural fit. How are you going to validate that, right? So, how do you let someone down gently, still get valuable information for them? And maybe give them an opportunity to grow. Yeah?
Would you like to add something? Would you like to add? Yeah.
One funny story, because I've actually been told in a rejection call for this position that I wasn't a cultural fit, and I was deeply hurt, and I was oh my god, that's so rude, why would they say that to me? And but in the end, I was yeah, actually they were right. I did not fit into that super corporate culture, and I was happy they also mentioned that, but still, yeah, you should find the underlying issues.
Great.
Yeah, I can also just add to that. Earlier in my career, less experienced, I heard that all the time and didn't question it. This feedback on candidates not being cultural fit. And yeah, as you get more experience, you realize that's we've never defined what is our culture. We don't know how to measure that. What are the traits? Can we operationalize it at all? And it takes more experience to get to the point where you actually challenge that when you hear it. But yeah, in most cases when you hear it, beware. It is usually just a way to justify some, maybe not bias, but just some dislike, personal issue they might have with a person. So yeah, call it out when you see it, and just in general, a best practice for any company is to define what exactly is our culture, what are the traits, competencies, and can we measure those across all different areas of the company.
Thank you very much. Maybe we can get back later on cultural fit. I just wanted to go on because we have many questions, and we all would like to let you go home sleeping tonight. My following question would be, there are many studies that say that if you change the way you write a job offer, you might get somebody to be more prone or less prone, or certain specific groups to apply to the position. Are you doing something like this or not? And if you're doing something, what? Can I ask you?
So it's yes, I've read some of these studies. It's difficult to quantify, because how can you quantify things you don't hear about? Like, how many people have I discouraged from applying? They don't tell you, by the way, I was discouraged from applying. I saw this, but you should know. So yeah, difficult to measure how big the problem is. So also difficult to know how much you need to improve. But there's some, again, just best practices out there. Judith mentioned the gender decoder tool. So this is just basically a way that you scan your job ads for what are called gender coded words. So I think basically if you use a lot of action-oriented words or things associated with masculine traits like dominant, competitive, ninja apparently is one as well that gets flagged, but it's common in startup job ads. So basically avoid those, because whether even the person reading the job ad is aware of it or not, or consciously aware of, this doesn't sound like something for me, it could be discouraging them from applying, and then the top of your funnel will be less diverse. And so yeah, there's gender-coded words for males, and then females it's like cooperative, any other examples? Yeah, more like nurturing associated adjectives and verbs. Supportive, yeah. So that might, by the same token, discourage males from applying. So yeah, it's just a pretty easy fix, right? You run it through a tool, it flags things. You don't have to do everything the tool says. Sometimes it might be appropriate, the words you're using, but why take a chance as well, right? Why exclude people?
Can I ask you, we talked about male-female division. Do you think for some reason did it happen to you to have the same issues with a religious problem, for example, or other kind of biases?
Again, tough to quantify, because I don't know people who had an issue and then I just didn't hear from them as a result of that issue. But yeah, I mean, one thing that I see that kind of baffles me a little bit is startup culture. It's very bro-ish in a way, or at least that's how some companies portray themselves, right? It's like, work hard, play hard, hustle, and their careers page will be full of just pictures of parties and people who are clearly drunk. And that's fine. You want to give a sense that they can make friends and socialize with their colleagues, but if you overemphasize that aspect, you do risk. People from certain backgrounds, they don't want to party. They want to party, but they don't necessarily want to drink alcohol to do that. So that's one thing I wonder. Says I as I drink my wine while on a panel. I don't know if anybody else had something.
tell me again what, I kind of...
We talked about how the structure of removing male-female division, like biases. I thought my question was if you had any experience with other kind of bias, like religious, for example, or...
Oh yeah, definitely the male gender, and interestingly enough, it was a perception problem, right? So we got lots of Kununu comments about the fact that we were obviously a male, bullish, I think, is really a good way to describe, the founder scene, the startup scene, they're young, they're coming in there, like, guys, young, dynamic, competitive, yeah, rock the market, world leader, whatever, world domination. And de facto, everybody thought there were no women in the company. So we had comments basically on, you're obviously, only men, you're only hiring men. And I said, well, no, actually, de facto, we have more women than men across the board for a food tech platform, which is pretty interesting, actually. And we actually, within the company, there was the same perception. The people who were working there even had the perception there were more men than women until we published the statistics and said it's actually exactly the opposite. So what we realized then was that we had to change the wording of the job ads. We really had to start looking at, which we're working on now. It's a project that we've got in order to encourage, especially also in leadership positions, more women to proactively apply. I mean, we have little to no proactive, for most of the roles that we have to do everything via direct search. But even then, to get women to be interested in the roles, we had to change the way we approach them. And for one thing, we also had to say, in leadership positions, for example, where there's a bit of a different ratio, but we still have enough women there, that we are actually a company, who promotes both genders, and also the transgender being also the diversity issue is not just male and female. We have MFD now, right? So there is, especially in Berlin, an entire community, of course, that also wants to be included and doesn't want to be excluded, and has quite a level of expertise that you want to cater to. And so that's the new project that we have now, is how can we add to our culture by also addressing these populations and making them aware of the level of diversity that we have at those areas, in those levels of the population as well.
It comes to my mind the fact that probably it's easier to put in place something to avoid discrimination while people is already on board in the company, because you have more time, you can dedicate to new policies. And how to avoid this kind of discrimination, for example, during the recruiting process?
As I said, I didn't see it. I personally don't think anybody was consciously discriminating at all. Really, not at all. The awareness level of the fact that they had gender-specific vocabulary and a gender-specific way of approaching a bullish market, that was, and also in this case, not discriminating against a large population. It's just not attractive for people because they have to increase, how they engage and communicate on topics that are of common interest, right? And so, I would, as I said, I really don't think anybody's consciously discriminating. It's opening up the field, right? It's about integration, opening up the field. And we took very seriously the comments in Kununu and Glassdoor, as we realized this is a perception problem that is not reflected in the actual setup of the company. And then we realized it was a perception problem within the company. And if you want to offset discrimination, discrimination starts in people's heads, who have a misperception of actually maybe how the setup is. So if you're wanting to open up the field, you have to address that quite openly. And we were talking about bias. It's all a question of just challenging people's assumptions as well. And then also making sure they are heard if they have concerns, right?
I would like to go on this topic, thinking about blind recruiting. For example, through Meritocracy's.
To be real concrete, we've done more surveys on this now, yeah? With candidates and also with the staff members. That's another thing that was a result of that, right?
Yeah. Thanks. I was saying that it was interesting to me to address the topic of blind recruiting. For example, through Meritocracy platform, just to give you an idea, we process around 150,000 applications per year, just to give you a number. We through the whole platform, we have jobs in 25 countries. we did the choice time ago. I mean, it wasn't on purpose, but we are not still blind. So any recruiter can see name, surname, and maybe if the candidate's choice is to do, they can upload the picture so they can see name, surname, and they can see the picture of the candidates. What is your experience with, for example, trying to do blind recruiting? I don't know if you do it, but if you do it, did it work better or not? Or what is your perception? I would ask to Judith.
We're not doing this, and I actually think it would offset the efforts we have in hiring more women at our company. Some of you might not know where I actually work. It's a music streaming platform for classical music. So it's founded by two men, one of them being a bit older, and the other one sort of my age. And with that, sort of the target group of our users is 35 upwards, way more male than female. And I forgot what I wanted to say. What was the question? Yeah. So.
Not helpful.
Yeah, I don't think it would be helpful. We're 82 people at the moment. We have a quite diverse team, also with 30 nationalities. A very good mix of male and female. Also, not enough females in leadership positions, but working on that. And for us, blind recruiting would not be an option at the moment.
Can I ask you, like, this is a difficult question. So sorry for asking. You said we don't have enough females in leadership positions. Do you think that this is because probably the recruiting process was biased in any way and led you to not having enough females in leading positions, or for some reason the company evolved in a way that didn't allow enough females to take these roles now? I know it's a difficult question. Sorry for asking, but I was really curious.
Yeah, great. I'm going to try to answer that. So, of course, in my role, this is really important to me, and I always push female candidates or other gendered candidates. But it's really hard because, in my experience, females get judged by what they've done, and male people get judged by what they can do, by their potential. So I'm sort of like the lone fighter for this, and yeah, it's sometimes hard to then get those candidates through the process and push them.
Create the right conditions in a way.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just say something about
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of recruiters in the room. Maybe you've heard of blind recruitment. Just I have some thoughts on it. So there's a few limitations, right, with blind recruitment. So removing names, identifiable characteristics from a CV. One is the tools are not so great. So there's no really reliable way that a candidate can like upload a CV, because CVs take so many diverse formats. The tools will black out stuff that shouldn't be blacked out, all of that. So the only way that you can do it reliably is asking the candidate to remove these identifiable characteristics, which basically adds another hurdle to applying, and you may be losing out because some people are just like, no, I'll just apply to a company that accepts my CV the way I've made it. Then also, even if you do have a perfect tool that removes name, picture, everything, if somebody is biased, consciously or not, there's still enough clues in a CV to where you can sort of deduce what the person's background is in terms of ethnicity, gender, like languages, what schools they went to, where they've worked, country code of their phone number, right? So I would say it's an imperfect solution, and it's more of like and even if you do implement it perfectly, it doesn't solve any bias that you could encounter later down in the process, right? That just helps a candidate's chances of getting past the CV screen, getting past any bias in that first stage, but it won't help further down. But promising and very well-intentioned initiative. I just don't think it's really at a stage yet where it can really solve any problems. It's like a band-aid on a bullet wound, I like to say, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Removing name and surname, I don't think it's a way more complex work than removing just name and surname. One question on interviews. Do you all run you said about structured interviews on your company, so I guess all of you have a structure on which that you have to follow during interviews. Is there any moment in which you decided to change the structure of your interview to make the candidate feel better in a way? And if you did it, why? And last question, no, this is enough, just this.
Well, I'm not personally, within the volume of recruiting that I've done in the past, a big fan of interview question catalogs, right? You know, where you basically have then 10 questions and everybody asks the same questions and then records the answers, okay? Because I think it just seems more like an interrogation and not what it should be, engaging somebody in a dialogue. So when we're doing the interview training also for the leads, and in this case also the cultural interview training, is we give them, let's say, 5 basically anchors for which they should deep dive and can choose how they decide to deep dive on that. So the flexibility is actually situational, right? We have these areas, how they arrive at some kind of information along the lines is completely up to them and also up to the candidate, because like I said, we don't want to be so focused on getting structure and getting output and getting the right answers or assessing somebody's performance in a certain workshop scenario that we actually forget that this is an individual who is maybe a potential colleague, yeah? And we're actually colleagues hiring future colleagues, right? And then that should be the setting, right? We want to actually give people enough room to show who they are and to do that. So these anchor points really help. And then we also have then certain questions that if people are, you know, so like, oh, I don't know what to ask, you know, and they're not so skilled at interviewing, that we help them a little bit with that. But what we have found is they just have these anchors, the things that they know that they want to achieve, they will actually automatically focus on the candidate, yeah? And in interview training, we have an interesting phenomenon. I'd be curious to see if you guys are seeing the same thing. When the hiring managers and also the interviewers start talking a lot, this is normally a no. Yeah. So what we've also started to do was look at the talking time, the speaking time, candidate to interviewer ratio, and actually train them to not talk so much, which greatly increases somebody's possibility of being able also to, show who they are. Yeah.
Can I ask you, you both the same question? So. What about structured interview? We talked about structured recruiting process. I really love the point of Karen, so let's don't make the interview structured in a way. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think that's kind of a misconception. It totally does backfire unless you do proper training. When people hear structured, rigid, strict criteria consistently applied, if you don't properly introduce that and train people on how to do it, and maybe even sit in on the first few interviews, particularly if a manager is less experienced, the feedback I've gotten, or I've even seen it in action, is like this really robotic sort of, you might as well just have a robot ask the machines, or just like a recording of someone asking the questions. So the key thing to keep in mind is exactly these anchor points. Is also something that I guide managers to use, and to just otherwise let the conversation breathe. Like I gave a training on this before. It was called where the theme of it was, an interview is a flamenco, not a bullfight. It made more sense if you saw like the graphics and stuff. Anyway, I won't go into it. So you need to really introduce this properly and maybe dispel of the first impression that structure means rigidity and formality, which it doesn't, right? You can still get information in a conversation, ask like open-ended questions, and then get your anchor, and then investigate further. So yeah, that takes some training. Some people seem just to grasp it quite quickly, but if not, you always check the feedback from the candidate, how was, and that's the recruiter's job, being this sort of consistent point of contact. How was that? Did you feel like you had a chance to run down your relevant experience or not? If not, why? Coach on a one-on-one basis, if not.
Yeah, again, it's very similar in Idagio. So most of the screening calls I'm actually doing by myself, because I'm the only person in the HR team. I have a colleague, but she doesn't do any recruiting, so it's all me. And I do have a set of questions, but I loosely follow them, so I have a bit of a structure. We've tried both in interviews, using the same questions for each candidate, to make them comparable and to give everyone a sort of a fair chance to sort of meet the criteria that we agreed upon in the first place. But I also think that these anchor points are the most important thing. We usually check for ownership, product thinking, grit, and all that kind of stuff. We also check for our values, which is really important to make sure that whoever comes into Idagio will actually feel comfortable in the company.
Thank you very much. Can I get back to you with another question? And this is regarding referral programs. I know that, tech talent is tough to find. We all know this, and this is why also we opened the office of Meritocracy in Berlin, because we want to help tech companies hiring smart engineers, and I'm convinced we can do it very, very good, and I hope you can find companies that are using now Meritocracy within the guests, so that they can provide feedback with you. So referral also under this kind of point of view. Regarding referrals, I know that many companies use them to attract the people, but we are talking about diversity tonight. Do you think that referral programs can produce any sort of bias within the company, because people that are, alike try to get together well, and so the same type of people attract the same type of people within the company? I would like to start with you, Judith. Thanks.
We do have a referral program which is actually going really well. About 50% of the people we hire come through referrals. Since we do have a very diverse team, also in the engineering part, I haven't really found that to be a problem. And even the referrals also have to go through the normal recruiting process, so they can be rolled out.
Yeah, same here. So in every company I've worked, referrals were a hugely important source of new hires. And here, like with any bias, the important part is to be aware of it, right? And with referrals, there is the temptation to put this halo on someone, because it's like, okay, this person's worked with them, that's already like halfway in the door, surely. This person knows what we're about, understands our culture, they're a good judge of character, because, they work here. And yeah, the temptation is to just like speed them along the process. And the way that you counteract this is, awareness. What I've always made sure to do is to speak to the person referring and get a little bit more detail on how closely did they actually work together, how close were they outside of work, what's the nature of their relationship, to see how much of it is based on like objective experience working with them in similar roles, or just a more personal relationship. And then same as Judith, like make sure they go through the same process, are measured by the same criteria as anybody else.
I got the fact that once they came in as a lead, in a sense, they follow like a structured process, as you said before. And so this part is clearly a success. Do you find that anyway having a lead generation when I'm talking about candidates as leads done with referral program anyway can lead to a problem in diversity, and if so, are you trying to put in the pipeline of candidates coming from different sources on purpose if you have a lot of candidates coming from referrals?
Tough question. I would say if there's any lack of diversity that results from relying too much on referrals, it's nothing that I've experienced, to be honest. I wouldn't say that would be a major, anywhere I've worked where a lack of diversity on a team or in the company generally was an issue. I wouldn't say referrals were necessarily the issue. I mean, that also is helped by the fact that a lot of people we hire come from similarly diverse companies, right? So the chances are their former colleagues were also from diverse backgrounds. And yeah, other than that, I don't really... Good question, but I don't have a good answer.
Thank you. Can I ask you, Karen, about referral programs? What do you think about them, and if you have the same experience as Judith?
Well, actually, yes, I do have the same experience with them, and we do rely heavily on leads in the market, but leads are for me also a form of referral. So we actually go into the company in difficult to fill roles and ask people what their experiences are. They're normally in networks and various groups or meetups or whatever. And that's been really helpful for us actually to find out what's going on in the market. So I kind of make it a bit broader and not just, somebody, well, I'm going to recommend my friend, my boyfriend or whatever. I mean, if they're a good fit for the role, why not? But the actual, at the end of the day, they have to measure up to everybody else's criteria. And in our area with, tech platforms, etc., if you don't have people referring other people, you just don't know who's actually looking to transition, right? Because they might not move in and of themselves, and most of them don't, right? So that's also helpful to know what's going on in the market.
Thank you very much. I would like to pass just to the last topic from my side so that we can open even the Q&A from the public, as we have many HR recruiters here. It would be probably a lot interesting if we have some questions and discussion coming from the public. My just last topic I wanted to touch, just to give some ideas even to the public, is about inclusion. So we talked a lot about recruiting. So what would have to happen when the candidates get in and get hired from the company. My last topic would be what to do when a candidate is already in the company since months. And my question would be, do you think, by your experience, are there any groups or of any type that are more likely to be discriminated after a while in which they worked in a company, or things you have to pay attention peculiarly to regarding inclusion of your employees?
Do you mean people who have already been hired? I mean, are you talking about discrimination on the whole, or
Groups or minorities that are more prone to...
Well, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, if we're looking in the tech environment, one thing that we actively actually went against was this, oh my God, not another CV from... Thank you. Yeah. That is a huge form of discrimination, on top of the fact that, we had to sit them to, yeah, it really is, I mean, so, oh my God, the person's from me, I'm not even going to look, oh, I already see it on the name, blah, blah, blah. In part, maybe because again, how they present them, they're basically basing their first judgment call on paper, right? And I said, well, actually, we want to look at the qualifications. So if the qualifications are quite broad and people are looking for an entry point, then they might, shoot wide, yeah? And often and from certain groups, and it's not only the Indians, actually the Anglo-Saxons do the same thing, yeah? They shoot kind of broad, yeah? Because they go more from the general's perspective, and then you're going to hit somewhere, right? And the problem is, in the more specialized industries that we have, is that you get this flooding, or they feel flooded by it, and then it doesn't matter what the person's reference point is, they don't qualify it, they simply kick them out within the first minute. And so we said we're going to challenge that. First of all, if there are reference points, you have to say why that person isn't going to be, in this case, that can't be a reason to not look at that person. We would then, if we need to figure out if there's some substance behind this, and that person obviously, if they applied for the job, thought something about that, then we should at least give them 15 minutes or 30 minutes of airtime to qualify why they think they're qualified for, what the reference point is and the reason for applying for the job. And then we can go. But we can also have a few more reference points, that would help us to get rid of a bias, right? So what's the motivation for the person to be in the country that they're in right now as an expat? What other things can they contribute, not only where they have worked before, but also to say, we can't use that as a killer argument, right? Where somebody comes from, yeah? Do you see what I'm getting at? And I really find that in this thing of, not another CV from India is only one thing. I think we have several others as well that people are just not prone to talking about, right? Because nobody wants to say I discriminate, no? Don't think anybody here discriminates, right? No. Nobody would actively put up and say, yeah, because maybe you're not aware of it, but discrimination happens somewhere else. And I can give you an example. Our office manager, okay? When we first hired him, thank God he didn't put in a picture, because who knows who might have seen that CV and not have hired him. So the guy comes in, completely covered in tattoos. Nobody say anything? Most people do. As an office man, he applied for the office manager. The first thing is that we said, could he maybe have been discriminated against? Do you think maybe another company would have hired him with the level of a super intelligent guy, right? Absolutely fantastically qualified for the job and for many other things as well, but he's covered in tattoos. So in order to get rid of the discrimination aspect, we just voiced it and said, okay, look, we're very highly diverse. There are a couple of other aspects along those lines that I don't want to disclose. But we actively really talked about that. I said, and at the end of the day, we actually realized, and that's why I go back to the cultural ad, if you don't talk about it, right? If you don't voice somebody's concern about that, maybe somebody would have thought, do we really want somebody who's sitting at our reception desk as a key point of contact covered in tattoos with, what are those things called again in the ears? Those big things? What are they called? I don't know, but you know what I'm talking about, right? Every now and again he also has a nose ring. Well, does. Yeah. Is he great at what he does? Of course he is. Does a physical appearance say something? Of course it does. Yeah. Is he making a statement? Yes, he is. Is it a cultural ad? Absolutely. Is he still qualified for the job? Yes. You have to get people over their reservations, and maybe it wasn't just the tattoos. Maybe the person was visually impaired. Yeah. Meaning you could obviously see that the person was maybe not quite blind, but blind. Would you also hire that person for a reception job? Would you consider somebody who is maybe visually impaired, to put it to you that way, has obvious eyesight issues? Would you hire them for a reception job, yes or no? Would you consider them? Yes. You can even say no. There's some people who say, I would not consider them, right? And that's exactly my point, whether it's a tattoo, visual impairment, deaf, whatever. If we're talking about inclusion, then we have to open up the field. Would somebody apply who has a visual impairment? Will we even address that population to maybe hire somebody in? Probably not. Yeah? And I think that this is the thing that people say, would I go there? No, probably not. Meaning, but maybe we could if we really want to open up the field and offer opportunities to very talented people. I think the most inspiring story I read on Facebook once was a deaf organization in the States that set up a chain store of cafes that hire, I mean, you're actually not allowed to do that in the States. I don't know how they got around that, but they did. Because you also can't exclude people who are not deaf, yeah, you know what I'm saying? So, but they hired exclusively deaf people. So it was financed there. And so all of these cafes are run by people who are deaf. Yeah, in a wonderful restaurant situation. The chefs are deaf, everybody's deaf, yeah? And he gave a very good interview on their hiring practices along those lines, yeah? That they are giving exceedingly, you know, people who are really talented, want to finance their studies or whatever, giving them an opportunity to earn money that they might not have in another setting because of the fact that they sign, yeah? And it was no problem at all because they can take orders much faster than a hearing person because they're not bothered by the noise levels. They just simply sign over to the kitchen, you know, what they want to have, you know. So they were actually much quicker, much more efficient, and much more friendly. And if somebody had a problem, they would just use a notepad. You know, see, there are ways around that. And I think that if we're looking at the young dynamic and whatever situation we have, it's not only about people who are impaired, we're also talking about age, yeah? How many people have gotten a CV, and I can give this to them, where the person was over 50? How many people rejected them? Because they were over 50. Or the answer was, oh, I think they might not fit there. Too senior. I'm going to give this to my colleague.
Yeah,
That's also for me. Excuse me. Too senior, if age is a factor and nobody's discussing it, is a form of discrimination. And I think it's really important that we're not ashamed to say that. Yeah? Yeah.
All comes to the fact that, I mean, it's not what does it mean they are too senior? I mean, should it signal something? Should it signal that they might be less flexible than youngsters, for example?
You don't know.
It's not about age. That's what I'm saying. So, like, probably comes to a point in which it's not like the form. It's the substance behind the form. So if you are not,
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, if you can't do the job in any way, and we make sure that we are totally sure that, given your characteristics, you can't do the job in any way, that's not discrimination. This is my point of view. If we can find one way, even if there is just one chance out of 1 million in which we can impair you and like let you do your job, this is like, it's a duty of the company try to not to discriminate, like a visual impairment for a person affected from visual impairment from a receptionist job, because there are ways in which this person, if he or she or is qualified to do the job, can do the job. This is my point of view. So we should think very, very carefully about this, and we should think about the substance, not the form. But I don't know if you share the idea.
But I mean, you know, visual impairment is easy, yeah? Being deaf, that's easy, right? These are the things that are obvious, right, to most people, right? And then I would say, how many people, what's your level of people with physical disabilities or any type of other disability, how many do you have in your company? And can anybody say we have people with disabilities in our company? Raise their hand. Okay, yeah, not so many, right? And again, I would say that's the obvious part. The more subtle discrimination is in everything that's outside of male-female, yeah? So transgender, LGBT, all that, as well as age. The most subtle discrimination you have is age. Biased, either person too young, yeah? Or too old. I mean, at any time, and nobody discusses age discrimination. And so the way you can flag age discrimination is too junior and too senior. Yeah, too junior is also a form of discrimination. Yeah.
Absolutely. Can I ask your point on what we have been discussing? Like we were talking about inclusion, but after the recruiting process, then the discussion shifted. I would probably ask you your point of view on what we were discussing now. So, I mean, what is the border between excluding or including?
It's tough to identify the border. Yeah, I mean, I sympathize with any recruiter because, right, you are under pressure to deliver, and essentially get people hired within a very limited time frame. So you do have to some extent, hedge your bets. And sometimes it can feel like a trade-off in cases like this, right? I have this office manager vacancy. If I don't fill it within a couple of weeks, it's my ass on the line. Maybe not quite that extreme, but I'll be under even more pressure. And yeah, it does feel like a trade-off in some cases. Like, do I satisfy a diversity goal, or do I do something which, is a risk, but it's a net positive in terms of diversity for the company, or do I take the safe option, use some pretty rational criteria? For example, it's not so crazy to think, well, a person that can see well probably will ease into this role quicker than a visually impaired person, right? It's a very visual, fast-moving job. So you kind of have to make those choices, and a lot of those are conscious choices, not really based in unconscious bias. So I don't know where the borderline is. Like, where do you focus your efforts on diversity versus this pragmatic, kind of what you're pressured in some organizations, what the only thing you're paid to do. Some organizations have zero diversity targets. Leadership doesn't buy into it at all. In fact, they have strong opinions against positive discrimination. They don't think it works. They think it actually harms the cause of underrepresented groups. So yeah, it's really a difficult question to answer, and it does feel like a trade-off sometimes, but in general, yeah, again, awareness is key, right? As long as you're aware of those trade-offs and you even voice that, you say, look, okay, this process might take longer, it might be a steeper learning curve for this person because they have this or that disadvantage, but it's not their fault. They were either born that way or they've been discriminated against before. You would flag that to a manager and have a discussion. Is the net positive you get in terms of diversity worth the added risk?
Maybe it's also just having diversity and inclusion as a part of your company targets as well. A couple of objectives, at least one diversity and inclusion goal that would at least help you to be able to discuss it if you have profiles that might not be an obvious match in the beginning, right? I would agree with you. That helps.
Thank you very much. I just suggest to consider diversity and inclusion not just as a beautiful flag, but as something that empowers something else within the company. Judith, just last question. Do you have a point of view or something to add on this? Otherwise, we shift directly to questions. Shift? Okay. Do we have, we run a bit out of time. We have 10 minutes for the questions and Q&A with the public. Do we have any question, any experiences even from the public to share with the speakers? Yes. Thanks, Moritz.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Moritz. I own a firm called Isekai. We set up global communications departments for companies, and that includes guiding recruitment processes. I have a question specifically on the cultural bias, and there's something that I have a hard time overcoming. I've spent the last 18 years in India, Vietnam, and in the Middle East, living there, also being the hiring manager there for in many cases. And what I find extremely difficult is that there's cultural preferences towards certain types of personal attributes, behaviors, on the job, with the teammates, etc. And those cultural attributes, for example, if you hire in Vietnam, they're necessary to be successful in that market. But if the hiring manager, whether they be an expat or they are at headquarters in Germany or the US or anywhere, is from a different culture, they might hire but based on their own preference, based on what they see is what makes someone successful in that role, like a sales manager in Vietnam or a marketing manager in Vietnam. And so I find it difficult to have that conversation. So I don't know if you have any experiences, I don't know if you recruit globally. I think it's a bit different from what you mentioned of having 90 nationalities or different cultures in Germany, which is people are already here, so you're immersed in the German culture. There's a certain level playing field.
We're bringing them in.
Yeah, but you need, for example, the Vietnamese talent to stay within that cultural framework, right? To be successful in Vietnam. And how do you get the American or German hiring person involved in the process to overcome their own personal bias towards their cultural preferences? Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, that makes sense, yeah.
Who wants to answer? Come on, just decide.
Maybe I'm stating the obvious. Training, awareness, bias training. I'm really specifically targeted to hiring in a global market, because you're not hiring in a global market. I mean, we're actually hiring people who, and we basically also need people who are highly adaptable to adjusting to a culture that's not, actually succeeding in a culture that's not their home base, right? So that's also a completely different skill set as far as their agility and ability to deal with ambiguity and to adjust to a new environment. So if you're actually, you wouldn't be focusing on the candidates, you would be focusing on the hiring managers. And I am a big fan of the bias training, right? To put them through those courses. Because if they were aware of it, we wouldn't be talking about this, right? They would say, of course I'm not going to hire somebody, who's going to swim in my waters. I'm only going to be focused on, because I want them to be successful with our business over there. Yeah, and the only way you can increase that awareness is if you train them and have a dialogue about it, not just one training. Okay, I went to my bias training, it was one day. It's like I went to my diversity training, it was one day, check. Yeah, but that you have that on a regular basis, right? I think that is, and have them validate their answers. For every no that they give, they have to give 5 reasons that are substantiated.
Thanks. Would you like to add something, Andreas?
Yeah, sure. I agree. Training is probably the best way to make people aware of the fact that yes, like there may be differences in corporate culture and maybe even wider culture, which kind of reward certain behaviors or ways of working in one place and maybe are less compatible with corporate culture or ways of working in where we are. But it's exactly that, making them aware that it's I don't want to get into like a nature versus nurture debate, but that it's something that's learned and can be essentially, people aren't not able to change that, right? If they're kind of immersed in a different place, different culture, they can learn something new ways of doing things.
Thanks a lot also for the question, Marit. We had a question back there. Few questions. Okay, 1 second. Otherwise I'll kill myself. One.
Thank you. You mentioned that you had some type of things in place in your organization. I think it was Andreas, to sort of increase quotas of other genders or nationalities or something like that. Is that correct? Like that you had something in place that other organizations go against, sort of having specific quotas or things like that, and how, my question was how you sort of really implement that. So if you have, let's say, female quotas or things like that, how you've gone about implementing that.
Okay. Yeah.
Or if either anyone else has, that's my question.
Thanks. So,
Yeah.
I'll just show you.
So I think what you're referring to was, I was saying that there are organizations where those kinds of initiatives are actively resisted, right? Where they're kind of antithesis to how certain founders think a company should work. But yes, I have worked in places where there weren't like quantified quotas, but there were definitely initiatives. I mean, I worked in the games industry for 4 years. The games industry has, maybe you've even heard, if you've read some of the news about the games industry, some of the scandals that unfolded there in the past couple of years, you know that it's got a big issue with, I mean, so the target audience, right, the gamer, and to have a gamer identity usually means to be like a young teenage white boy who loves to shoot virtual people. And that's, you know, that's a stereotype, but for a long time, games companies, the way that they hired, also reflected in some ways this target market. So hugely male-dominated, hugely sort of, in some ways, misogynistic in how they promoted themselves and how they, yeah, so, and I don't know if you heard about this scandal called Gamergate. Anyway, huge shitstorm. But, so I worked in this company and we had a different target market. So we were making casual, free-to-play games in the vein of Candy Crush, kind of like that. And so, yeah, there was really a concerted effort to make our hiring reflect our target market. And this goes back to something Riccardo was saying, actually, like, you know, diversity, you shouldn't just do it for show. It's because it actually, it pays off. Like, you know, it makes business sense. There's been research done that shows that diversity of opinion, people from diverse backgrounds make for more profitable companies, essentially, especially in consumer goods. So yeah, there was a concerted effort to get more women on board. We didn't have a number attached. How do we do it? I mean, we were starting from quite a low base in terms of the perception of us as a company in this hugely male-dominated, some thought like misogynistic industry. We really needed to do like a lot of foundational things. So things like being present at events which were targeted at underrepresented groups. I mean, there's luckily nowadays for the games industry, a lot of these events. There's one called Women in Games where we went every year. We did like CV workshops and things like that. There's a local event actually for LGBTQ candidates. It's called Sticks and Stones. We were there every year. And actually one of the biggest things in terms of increasing female applicants was to send to like targeted events, like just huge industry-wide games conferences. If we were going to send a speaker, make sure that it's one of our female employees. So this like had a huge effect in terms of showing other people working at other companies, oh wow, like they take this seriously. They have their role models, their thought leaders are women. That means if I apply there, if I go there, that's a place I will be welcome. I see myself in this person, and yeah, that was hugely influential. So those, as I said, those are really foundational sort of strategies, but they worked quite well. I mean, by the time I left, our company was like 35% women, which for a games industry is like triple like the average. So yeah.
Thank you very much. Would you like to add something, Judith? Okay, we just go to the last question. Who wants to do the question? Okay, thanks.
Thank you. I actually have 2 questions at that time. They're somehow related a little bit. You actually were talking about having more female applicants in your company. You wanted to have more female people in leadership roles. And I'm just asking myself, if you make such a statement, don't you think that you are already biased? Because in the end it's about the person, it's not about the gender. But if you say, okay, I want to have female people in leadership positions, doesn't that automatically mean that you favorize the female gender? And the other question, because I don't want you to run that often, is, as you might probably also know, in Germany we finally have a third gender. How do you actually face it in this company? How can you make sure that the culture, the company is embracing this diversity? do you just put in D or a star in brackets after a job title and then you say, okay, job is done, or do you actively face this topic? Do you have open discussion rounds about that? Because I can imagine that a lot of people actually don't understand what sexual orientation, gender, sexuality, and so on means. And
I don't know what the D means, yeah?
yeah,
That's
for example.
okay.
So these are actually two questions I...
Thank you very much.
We don't have a third gender. It's not a third gender. It's non-gender specific. D is non-gender specific.
Who wants to answer? There we go.
So the first question, yes, I positively discriminate against women. No, so for women, like I want to hire more women, and I want to make sure this happens because it's not equal. We're nowhere near equality, and so something has to be done about that. And in terms of gender, we actually have two people who don't identify as male or female, who we hired recently, and we did a really nice event where they actually talked about the differences and kind of explained how they got there and explained concepts behind it, and it was super interesting. Unfortunately, some of our management didn't take part in this event, but the team did, and it's really a really important subject for our team members. So now we just have to also bring it to management.
Does somebody wants to add something for a second question? Can you scream the second question once again? Sorry. The gender, yeah, the third gender.
I mean, I totally agree with you, right? You know, then we kind of jump over to the other direction and then only women, etc. But it isn't. And again, it's not about women and men. I think it's really great that we have the third category because it's a non-gender specific category. It's for people who don't want to classify themselves along those lines. And in the target group that we have, which is a very diverse target group, not only in the consumers industry, because we're a food tech retail company, that means we cater to a very wide audience. You know, they want to see that reflected as well, and we do too, yeah? I mean, that's an opportunity for everybody, and raising awareness about why that is, I think, is a part of the community work that we also do, right? It's very important. So when you said it's a third gender, I was like, no, we don't have a third gender, and I know that because I have my own personal experiences within my family with a transgender child, actually, as a matter of fact, right? So very happy with the sticks and stones and all of those things. And I can only say we have to promote awareness, doing initiatives, academies, lunch and learns and things like that, allowing people to tell their stories. I just want to say that you did. I think that's a wonderful thing to do, and I think everybody needs to participate. We can't do enough of it, yeah? And we need to be aware of the fact that, sure, why do we say we want to promote women? We want to promote people, which means a wide range of people who can add and just make the world a little bit better than they found it, right? No.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank you guys for being here tonight. I would just let you have drinks, beers, pizzas, and so on at the third floor. I will let just Shiza explain, my colleague Shiza explain some indications of where to go, what to do. I just wanted to thank you once again. Please remember two things. The first is the survey. You can help us making these kind of events better, so we would be thankful for this. And second, go on Meritocracy.is. We would like to welcome feedback even on our website. We try to build the best job seeking experience worldwide, so you can tell us if we are right or not in claiming so, and we thank you for your answers.
Alright guys, thank you so much for coming out. We really appreciated it. I know it's a bit of a sensitive topic, but it's something that I do think that needs to be, discussed and digested, so we really appreciate it. As Riccardo mentioned before, me and my colleague Chiara will be going around with a survey. It's really important for us to understand, your needs so we can cater these events, towards what you want, and also to help us expand as well and understand the industry better, right? On a logistical side, food will be served on the 3rd floor, including drinks. For any smokers, there is a balcony there, just so you're aware. If you shut the door behind you, you will be locked out. We will try and help you, just try and keep note of it. Restrooms, for those who have not been yet, are on this floor to your left. There is a sign to not go beyond there for privacy reasons, so please let's just respect that. You're free to take as many pictures as you want, have fun, use hashtags, Instagram, whatever you guys are into. If there's any Bosch employees in the pictures, we ask you not to post them and to be mindful of their privacy as well. Sorry. Yes, last minute. It would be a very big favor if those of you on these beautiful comfy chairs could pick them up and just put them on the top. That's all that we ask, and then you're free to help yourself to as much food as you want. And thank you again for coming out.